Started. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, for this last part of this day. My name is Driesen. I'm Learning Innovation Leader at aNewSpring. It's a blended learning platform, and I'm happy to be here with those brilliant people who will share some of their very nice ideas. I have to say, I like desserts a lot. Anybody else in the room like desserts? Oh, okay. A good audience. And when I order dessert, I don't want it to be one piece of dessert. I prefer it to be two pieces of dessert, a combination, a very nice combination. And I guess that's just what's going to happen this afternoon. We will serve you a very nice two-piece dessert for this show today. Over here, please stand up, both of you. First, we have Gemma Critchley.
Hi.
And there is Michael Salone.
Hi.
Gemma is Head of Technology and Innovation for Learning at Aviva, and she will talk about Let's Get Social. Sounds good, sounds energetic. And then after that, Michael, he has been a VP of HR in some large companies, has led corporate academies. Now he is the CEO of 360, and he's the author of this amazing book. The title is Tagging for Talent. That's also what his session will be about. And he's a real nice guy. He brought some books today, only for £10. At the counter over there, the central counter, you can buy them.
I'm so
£10, plenty of nothing. So, okay, but let's first
see if it's
listen to them and see what nice things they have to share with us. Gemma, please.
Great, thanks, Her. That's super kind, and I feel like I should have brought cake now for everyone with that dessert analogy. But I don't have cake, but hopefully I do have some things that are interesting and worth digesting, to carry on the metaphor. So, quick introduction to me. For those of you who don't know me, I can see a few friendly faces. I'm Gemma Critchley, and I head up Technology and Innovation for Learning at Aviva. And I'll tell you a little bit about my background, and there's a reason behind that. So, my background hasn't always been in learning. It has been for around about the last 6 years or so. But prior to that, I was actually working in digital marketing and social media for fashion retailers and e-commerce. I worked for an ad agency, always with the real focus on changing behaviour and making people buy things, changing their behaviour so they wanted the things that we were selling. The sort of inner altruist in me felt that wasn't the be-all and end-all, and there was another way to use this skill, to be able to change behaviour in a different way and hopefully change people's lives for the better if that's not too lofty an ambition. So I've worked for, like I said, ad agencies, fashion retail, e-commerce. My learning career started in BP, where I worked in the Learning Innovation team there. I then went to help set up a learning innovation practice at a consultancy, and most recently I've joined Aviva as their Head of Technology and Innovation for Learning. And what I'm trying to do there is to really bring in some of those things that I was doing in digital marketing and doing in social media to really connect people and help them to share knowledge, help them to find their way and navigate the organisation, and just really help people to perform better at work by connecting them. So over my career, I've seen social and collaborative technologies work really well. And I've also seen them fail spectacularly. So I want to share some of those success stories and hopefully give you some tips that you can go away and try. But also share some war stories and share what didn't work. So hopefully you can avoid those pitfalls. So first up, how do we know when collaboration is the answer? Is it when our organisations look like this? Like a hipster coffee shop in Shoreditch and everybody's on devices talking to each other? Or is it just real life? It's when we're in the office and in work. I think one of the things that people do a lot of is we assume that we should be doing something, or we feel like we should be doing something, especially if we come to an event like this, which learning technologies for me is a massive source of inspiration to what I do. But there is so much here that can feel slightly overwhelming. It can feel like oh my gosh, we need to go and do social media and we need to connect people and we need a collaborative platform. Actually, I think we need to take one step back from that, and I think we really need to understand what are the problems that our audience has. So the people who we're working with and really working for, those people who are our users, our consumers, our learners, our audience, whatever we want to call them, what worries them every day? So I would suggest the first place we start when we're thinking about collaborative technologies is to find out what that problem is, find out what that challenge is. Now, this is absolutely not learning needs analysis. It's not training needs analysis. What I would say here is I would never go and ask the business, what is the learning objective? I would say to the business, what outcome do you want to drive? But I would never say to them, what do we want people to learn as a result of going through this process? So to give you a real example, at Aviva, we have a real ambition around growth. We've spent quite a while fixing Aviva and fixing our balance sheet. We now really want to grow the business, and that's our ambition. And for me, that's a really tangible thing that I can then say, okay, we've got a problem, we need to grow. We're perhaps not doing that as quickly as we'd like. What can we do to help get there? And one of the ways that I would recommend that we actually do that is that we get into the work. So we don't do a training needs analysis, we don't have conversations with SMEs or business leaders around what they want or what they think they might need. We go and spend time with people doing the job, and we look at what it feels like to be in their life. So that might be going to spend some time in a contact centre with our guys in Norwich or Sheffield or Perth. It might be spending time with our digital teams in our digital garages globally around the world. We look where that problem is and we go and spend time with those people, not only asking them what their challenges are, but really deeply looking and observing and understanding and listening and being curious about what those problems are. Now, there's a model that you can use to help you do this, and my Twitter handle is at the end of the presentation, but if you want to connect with me on there, I'll share a link to it. There's a model called the Concern Task Resource Model that I use to help me to discover what that problem is and how I can help. It's something that I've been using for a few years. Nick Shackleton-Jones, who some of you will know, actually came up with the model, and for me it's beautifully simple. All you do is you do two things. You say to people, what are you worried about, and what tasks do you have to do? And once we understand that, then we can work out the resource that we need to provide someone with. So that might be a piece of content, it might be a platform, it might be a learning program, it might be nothing to do with learning at all, it could be a broken process that we can help them to fix. But it's just a little bit of a different way of doing things, and I'm sure that there are a lot of us here today that are already asking these great questions. I know we're all in learning because we're curious and we want to fix things, right? But that, for me, is super important. So before we even start to think about the technology, we really get into the work and we understand why we're doing it. Okay, so presuming we've done that, we've found out what the challenge is, we now need to figure out what is actually going to help people. So what is going to be the technology or the solution that will help to solve that issue that people have? And before we jump to that conclusion, so one of the things, and one of the traps that I've fallen into personally before is thinking, right, what have we got that we can use to solve this problem? I like to think that I'm quite resourceful. I like to think that I can make do and hack my way around problems and systems, but actually that's sometimes a bit unhelpful. So to give you an example, when I got to Aviva, we were faced with a very real challenge of connecting a global community of leaders that were in a leadership program that had no way of getting together physically, but they had real challenges and problems that they had to solve. So we looked at some of the existing technology that they were using. So all of the classics, email, Skype, WhatsApp, things that you just use every day. So we started to explore how they could work, but quite quickly we found that there were gaps and there were things that people couldn't do on those channels, or that they weren't able to do or didn't feel that they were making the connections that they needed to. One of them being, for example, a really simple and easy way to share videos or to cast votes and polls. So what we did is we said, actually, is there something else that we can use? And we went and we spoke to the team of leaders going through this experience, and we looked at what they used in their real lives, in their day-to-day lives. And Facebook was one thing that everybody said they felt pretty comfortable with. Not for work. Everybody said, no, I'd never accept a friend request from work, or I have a rule about that, I don't do that. But one of the things that was interesting was that they were really comfortable with using it and the functionality and the technology. And as some of you will probably know, Facebook have a business product called Facebook Workplace. This is free to a level, so it's probably not free if you get after a critical mass, and if there's anyone from Facebook in the room or who listens to this, we're probably going to get whacked with a great bill, but you can actually go on there today, now, after this session. You can sign up and see if that is something that will work for you. And that's something that we trialled with this group. We continue to go back to them and ask them, how are they using it, what are they doing? We look at the data as well, so we look at what they're using it for and how they're doing that, and that really helps to inform how we guide them through that going forward. So it's important that we don't get sort of hung up on technology, because it's not always the answer. Now, being at Learning Tech, it's probably a bit of a weird one for me to say, but fear not, the next slide is not learning is not the answer. But I think we have a duty to ourselves and to the people that we work for, who are consuming what we do and who are part of what we do, to really understand what fits into their lives. I know one of the sessions I was in earlier today, I don't know if some of you were in it, but the conversation was that this is another thing we have to do. It's like, I have to check my email and I have to check my phone, and now I've got a work phone and I've got WhatsApp and I've got this and that. We don't want to put something on people that is going to feel like another thing that they have to do, because we know that as much as we would love for learning to be at the top of everyone's priority list, it just isn't there. Like, it's the last thing that people think about. And if we can find a way to seamlessly help people to learn and maybe not even realize that they're learning, I think that is where the absolute magic is. Another sort of point to make on the technology is not the answer piece. If we build it, they won't come, or if we buy it, they won't come. Just switching something on isn't enough. There has to be a real need there and a problem that we're solving. People need to see the value and the benefit of what's in it for them. I've seen this work varying degrees of success, and I can see some of my previous colleagues from BP are in the room, so you will hopefully be able to attest to this as well. We've had things like Yammer, and we've tried them in areas, and in some areas they've worked brilliantly, but that's because they've really solved a need. Other areas, it falls flat because we haven't communicated why it's there, what it's for, what it could be used for, demonstrated the value, and we haven't made it fit into people's lives, and I think that's just something we need to be mindful of. So, presuming we've done that, we've figured out what the problem is that we're trying to solve, we've sat ourselves down and given ourselves a talking to about technology not being the answer and not jumping to conclusions, but understanding what might be the best fit. What we need to do now is, presuming we've decided what we're going to use and what problem we're going to solve, we do the rigmarole with IT, I won't go into that, but we get to the point where, okay, we have the tool, we have the problem. How do we now create a culture of collaboration, a culture of knowledge sharing? And this sort of goes back to the getting into the work piece that I talked about earlier. Starting with the problem and the challenge, we need to work out if collaboration is the answer to that problem. And if the answer is yes, then the best way that we can find out how to create that culture of collaboration and knowledge sharing is to look for the bright spots. So look in the organisation as to where collaboration is happening today. And whether your organisation has 2 people, 1 person even, or it has 200,000 people, you will find these bright spots who are collaborating and who are using technology to collaborate. Now, I'm sure there are some people sat there thinking with their cynic hat on, but we're rubbish at collaborating, that's why I'm here, that's why I've come to the session, I don't know how to do it. What I would say is look outside of work for this, still within your organisation, but look at where the collaboration is happening around things like your Pride network, if you have it, or a gender balance network or women's network, look at the five-a-side football team or the fantasy league that's running in your office. Look at people who are arranging the bake sales or yoga classes or running club at lunchtime. Those people are collaborating. They're using technology to get stuff done. They're bringing people together. They've got a shared purpose and a shared interest. I would say go talk to those people and say, what do you use? How do you do it? Do you do it on Facebook? Do it on Twitter, LinkedIn, piece of paper stuck on the wall? Get into the work and really understand how this is working for people, and look at what we can learn from that and what we can replicate, because I'm surprised every day that there is, we think we're not good at collaboration, but there's masses of collaboration happening. We're just not harnessing it in that right way, and I think once we start to spot where it is happening and unlock the secrets as to how they're doing it and what's making people really switch into it, I think that's where the magic happens. And I think one of the things that you may find when you're talking to people is that some of these people will be brilliant storytellers. Some of those collaborators who are joining people together will be great at telling stories and sharing stories. And some of them won't be, but some of them will have real great stories to tell. And we know that stories are how we learn. That's our way of learning. And if we can sit down with them and just have a coffee for 5 minutes and say, how do you get people from A to B? How do you get people doing stuff? You might have got someone who's great at organising the nights out in your team. It's an important skill. And again, it's collaboration. So look at what they're doing and look at how we can then apply that to what we're doing for learning. And we won't be able to apply all of it, but there will be gems in there that we can learn. So if we think we have created we've got to a point where we know how to start to create a culture of sharing and collaboration, what's next? So I've mentioned before that technology might help us to collaborate, but it might not. We have to choose the right technology, I think, to do the collaboration. And it may be that you feel that you've got a collaboration technology forced on you in your organisation. And I don't know, is there anyone here who has an official collaboration tool in their organisation, like Gemma or something like that? A few people. And out of you people with your hand up, can you leave your hands up a sec? Leave your hands up if you're using it on a personal level, not for your work. Okay, so I think that showed us, for those of you who weren't turned round, there was about 1 or 2 people who left their hands up. So I think people aren't finding that this technology is working for them, and that's what I want to go back to. It's around, let's make sure that the technology that we're using feels seamless and feels effortless, and just because the functionality is there doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for us. So I don't know if we've got any Love Island fans in the room. This is probably telling you a lot about my personal taste. But you know, on Love Island anyway, what they do is they say, on paper, he's my type. And I think that's one of the watch-outs that we can have with technology. On paper, they may tick all the boxes. They may say, yeah, you can upload video and you can tag people and you can follow people and there's messaging. But actually, when you get hold of it and you use it, that could be something that just does not work for your organisation and people just hate it. So I would say before we commit to anything, let's pilot, let's trial, let's test. Let's not feel like we have to commit to huge, big 4-year, 5-year contracts with companies. Let's say, look, this is going to be a small experiment for us. We're just going to try it and see what happens, and see where we get to. And I would always say, go back to your problem and let the problem drive the solution. The other thing is we need to make sure that we are drinking our own champagne. Now, I know some people call this eating your own dog food, which I didn't really love the picture of having a dog having his dinner up there. I was like, drinking your own champagne's much nicer. And what I mean by that is, if we're not using the stuff that we're hoping that our learners, our audience, our users will engage with, we can't, I can't stand there with my hand on my heart and say, this is a solution that's going to work for you. We have to believe it, we have to live it, we have to champion it. And if we're not doing that, I think there's no credibility in what I'm doing. I couldn't stand here today and have this conversation and say, this is what I've done in different organisations, if I'm not using it myself. Like, one example is Facebook Workplace. I, hand on heart, think that is a brilliant tool. I think it could revolutionised the way that we are doing work today. I use it. I use it with my team. We used it to arrange today, so we've sort of divided and conquered in sessions. There's quite a few of us here, and we've worked out what we're going to go and see all through Facebook Workplace, not one email, not one phone call. But I think you have to do things, you have to commit to doing them as a team. And if they're not working, you have to hold your hand up and say, this doesn't work. We're going to have to try something else. And being a little bit brave with it, I think, and experimenting. So I think, we've figured out the problem, we've decided that technology is going to be what we're going to go for. We're starting to try to build a community, a collaboration of community and sharing and collaboration. What's our role in the process? In one word, if you had to sum up what our role is in collaboration and sharing, is anyone going to be brave enough to share a word? Enabler. Enabler, nice. I think that is definitely one of them. Any others? I won't make you, don't worry. I think for me, these are some of the key things that we'll be doing. I think Enabler is absolutely part of all of these. So I don't think we are doing any kind of instructional design anymore when it comes to social learning. We are not designing learning experiences. We're not thinking about learning objectives. We're not sitting there and designing an instructionally design-led process to design learning. What we are doing is where our role becomes more of a discoverer. We're an enabler. So we are curating content. We're connecting people. We're role modeling that collaboration as a community. So we are the people out there blazing the trail and showing people how this works for us. And we're fire starters. We're catalysts. We're really making this come to life for people. We're seeing those light bulbs come on all over the organisation because it's really working for them. And we're signposting timely, useful, relevant stuff that helps people to get things done at work. And I think that's where the big shift is for me. It's no longer about sitting in a classroom or doing some e-learning and remembering the stuff. It's about, I've got to get stuff done. We're all increasingly more busy. We've all got increasingly more pressures. How can we seamlessly fit into people's lives to help them to achieve what they need to achieve and be amazing at what they do? So I think our role is changing. I feel like mine has already changed. And these are the sort of 4 guiding lights that I would always try and follow when I'm working with social media for learning. A few ideas that I wanted to share with you. So there are some stuff, if you've heard things today that have chimed with you, there is some stuff you could try. If you've heard stuff today that you don't agree with, like, call it out. Let's do questions at the end, but let me know what your challenges are, what isn't working for you, what you don't agree with. I've seen this work really well. I've seen it really fail. I think the key here is that we have to have a different way of doing things. We have to experiment and try stuff. We have to be ready to fail fast. It's not easy. It's quite scary, actually, to say to your boss, I'm going to try this, and it's going to take me 2 months to do it, and I'll be really focused on this project. And the objective might be that it completely bombs, and I have to just hold my hands up and say it didn't work, but we learned something. And that's a big leap for us to make, I think, as learning professionals, and a big leap for our organisations to make in terms of having that trust and having that fail-fast mindset. Everybody says it, everybody feels like we should be doing it at Aviva. Is it happening? It's happening in pockets. We're not quite there yet. I think the culture is changing, but I think we need people like us who are going to be brave and go out there and do stuff and try stuff. That's where we need to be. So a couple of things that you can maybe try. I mentioned Facebook Live, Facebook before. Facebook Live is a really cool tool on there. So a little bit like Periscope, which I've seen some of the learning tech feeds using this week. Facebook Live is just a really simple way of streaming video. So to give you an example, our Director of Talent is running a workshop today for hiring managers at Aviva. And he rang me up and he said, Gemma, can you help us with this? We're going to do some filming. We're going to film the hiring managers workshop and we're going to share it with people. So we had a long conversation about, actually, is there a better way to do it? Could we chunk it down into small pieces? Just so happens, my entire team, on the day that he's running the workshop, are at Learning Tech. So there's no one there who can actually help him do the filming, which we would normally do. But we said, hang on a minute, Facebook Live has this functionality. We'll give you a tripod, set it going, and you can live stream your session to hiring managers globally across Aviva, and you can save a copy of the video, and it costs you nothing, and it's no more complicated than pressing record. So he's trying that. It's an experiment that's happening as we sit here right now, so I can't say if it's been a success or not, but I will tweet later, and if it's failed spectacularly, you might not hear me championing that one again. But that's one that you can try right now. Another super simple one, which I'm sure loads of you have already, setting up a WhatsApp group to solve a common problem. These are things that I think we don't always think of as work tools, so I think we think of them as things that we use in real life and not in work. And my mission is to bring real life and work together. It shouldn't feel separate. So try that. If you've got a group of people who've got a common problem, bring them together using WhatsApp. You could commit to using Slack to run a virtual learning program. Again, that's a free tool that you can download. Suk did a really great session earlier. Suk Pabil did one of the lunch sessions, and he's written a blog post on it. So again, I'll share the link to that after this. But that's a really great way that you could get started just by running sessions on there, collaborating on documents, having conversations. You could use Pinterest to collect some ideas together. So if you are putting together a program and you're struggling to share content across teams or across areas or regions, bring it all together in Pinterest in a board and have people share their ideas on there. And then another super simple one is, if you've got a problem or a question, use Twitter to solve it. Pop your question out there with a hashtag and see what comes back. It's done me a world of favours a number of times. There is no one out there in Twitter who cannot answer a question that you have. It's my go-to, probably more so than Google, I think, when I've got a question. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to dwell, but it's super important, I think, that once we start to do things, we nurture them. And I'm just going to share, just before I finish, a figure that always blows my mind when I hear it. So a lot of these things, we put them in place in our organisations and we go, that's not working for us. We give it 2 months or 3 months or 6 months and we switch it off. Google Plus, it took them 16 days to reach 50 million users, whereas it took Twitter 2 years to reach that same number. So wildly different adoption curves. So Google Plus obviously had a great adoption strategy. They were like, this is great, come here. Twitter took them longer. But today, Google Plus claims to have 3.5 million active users, whereas Twitter has got 330 million active users. So they've got the technology right, they've got the need right, it's solving a problem, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to nurture what we've got. And then the only other thing left to do is to get started. So please let me know if you do try any of the things that I've mentioned. If you disagree with me, tweet me. I'm using the hashtag Let's Get Social, and that's my Twitter handle. Let me know what chimed with you, what didn't chime with you, and I would love to hear how you're all exploring collaboration and social learning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. There will be time to ask questions or start discussions later on. But first, our next speaker, Michael, on tagging for talent.
Good afternoon. So Gemma and I did not talk before today, and I cannot stress how right spot on you are about a few things. And you can tell by my accent that I am totally opposed to Twitter. It does not work well in every country or with every president. So, and I apologize in advance. Just to give a quick background, yes, I'm American, but I'm also French. I actually live in Malta now, so thank you for the welcoming weather. And also, I worked in a couple really, really large companies, and one of the things that really stuck out for me was exactly what Gemma said, was there's all these tools outside of the organization. Employees come to work and they suffer. So there was one little thing called tags, which you already know about, that I thought would be interesting to explore, and that's about what that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the snail is slow, I call it. I call it slop, actually, in my book, which is about slow organizational processes like the succession plan. You sit in meetings and you spend a lot of money on exactly that, a system that's supposed to last you forever because that's what the salespeople will tell you. And you want an easy solution, and by the time I sold a 10 million euro PeopleSoft system, it became something else. And it's very hard to go back and say that I was wrong, and it took us all this time and all these work groups to put it in place. It doesn't mean they're not good, it doesn't mean they don't do what they say on the tin, but at the same time, it's not exactly what employees are looking for, it's what we look for, and performance management is one of those processes as well. So I had a guy come see me when I was working at this big company talking about tags, and it was actually rather new at the time, and you already know what they are, correct? You know what tags are? Even the logo I didn't know was going to be, it's a tag cloud. So tags are something that it may seem a bit passé, but there's a lot behind tags that you may or may not know, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about 5 or 6 super simple principles. You're either going to hate it because it's too simple, or you're going to like it because it's simple, but just take away what you want from it, and that's all I ask, because I think there's some things that we make complicated that don't need to be. We tag everything today, even if we don't know it. Sometimes so since the word hashtag came out, it became more popular, but tags have been around forever. Engineers have used tags to tag coding, so they could find a piece of code inside 30 billion pieces of code, and why not use tags to identify talent? So that's what went through my mind. How many of you have learning and talent in your remit at work? It's still not very many people. It's usually learning, talent management, and I talk about all the good job titles we give ourselves, but it's very rare where we have talent and learning together. And that was one thing I learned setting up a corporate university. You'd be inside the classroom and you do a role play, and some young kid raises his hand because he wants to play the role of the CEO. And like, oh, this guy's not shy, you know, he really wants to try, he's ambitious, he's innovative, etc. So how to capture that? So we do it with when we go on vacation, and you may take a photo when you're on a safari, and there's some real obvious tags of what it is, but there's also a bunch of tags that are not so obvious. So I circle the boss because this line reminds me of my boss, but it happened on a safari, it felt dangerous. So there's tags that are not just about what's in the picture. How many of you are in Instagram? Okay. How many of you are tag spammers? So a tag spammer is somebody who adds a bunch of tags so that the picture can be found and it can be liked. There's other reasons, but you have lots of tags that have nothing to do with the photo that you've posted, but have something to do with the emotion or something you want to happen. So that happens at work as well. But we tag on LinkedIn and Twitter. How many of you, does anyone here work for LinkedIn? Or I call it linked out, because it works. If you use endorsements, it's not for you, because and we'll talk a little bit more about that, it's to sell the recruitment tool for LinkedIn, because they can find skills very easily inside the database. They sell it to a recruiter, you use it, it works, but there's a lot of things missing. But we use tags for lots of different things. So I talk about crowdsourcing of talent. Does everybody know what crowdsourcing is? Not so crowdfunding, you know crowdfunding, you know GoFundMe. Crowdworking, do you know crowdworking? Crowdworking is about getting a group of people to do something without maybe even knowing they're working on it together. How many of you know CAPTCHA? You know those words you have to type in? How many of you know reCAPTCHA? Do you know reCAPTCHA? So it's the second set of letters you can hardly read. It's very frustrating. The history behind that is there's a professor at Carnegie Mellon who's now sold it to Google quite effectively, is these second sets of words are scanned documents that have never been digitized. Newspapers, magazines that have never been put on a computer. So instead of having somebody sit there and scan them all, it's asked the world to do it. So if a high percentage of people all say that that word is altruiste, it probably is. And so you get the power of the crowd who's actually saying, this is that word, and I put it together, and it's most likely right. And then I wouldn't get into all the statistics of how much of it is right. Now you tend to see numbers. You tend to see house numbers, if you've noticed, which is very helpful to Google, who's doing Google Maps, which is also identifying street addresses they may not be able to read. So why not get employees to do the same thing? So I call this next step Tagability. I need you to take out a piece of paper or a tablet or your neighbor's wrist. This part of the wrist, not this part. And I want you to write down 3 roles that you're really good at. They don't have to be work roles, but they can be roles that you play at home, outside of work, in activities, areas that you may participate with your children or your partner. Just write down what 3 roles you think you're good at. And don't be shy. I'm not going to force anybody to. Okay, so did any of you write, was that hard to do? How many of you put work roles? Anybody willing to share some roles that are not, it doesn't have to be all 3, but a role that you put down that is not related to work, that maybe your boss doesn't know?
Baker.
Banker. And your boss does, baker.
Baker as in bake cakes.
A baker. And your boss doesn't know that? Never baked for him. Okay. You win a book. How's that? The baker. Okay, so now you have to be on your heels. The next one's easy. Write down 3 skills, knowledge or skills your boss doesn't know about. Or you can think of them, of course. It's at work, so your boss normally knows all your skills, right? Or the HR director, who's supposed to know every talent in the organization, should know all of your skills because you spent a lot of time putting together competency programs. So they should know all of your skills. Anybody want to share? Oh, come on, it's a 10-pound gift. And give it a...
Project management, bizarrely.
Project management?
The number of projects I've managed, it's nothing I've had to display in this organisation.
No, and so your job today is?
Head of Learning and Development.
Head of Learning and Development. They don't know that you're a project manager. Isn't that sad? Because think of how much project management we need in learning and development. So those 2 you tend to see in those online networking platforms when you endorse somebody. You tend to see roles and jobs. How often do you see behaviors and qualities and values? Think of 3 that you do well, that you're good at, your behaviors, that again, your boss may not know. This is harder, huh? It's just like a performance review when you're trying to measure people's behaviors. It's difficult. Somebody in the back, because it's unfair, you know. Okay. Yes? Encourager. Encourager. Very good. And your boss doesn't know that. What a shame. Because we need lots of those, and that's what we're going to talk about next. How did that work out? Thank you very much. So it sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? I mean, it's pretty basic. But capturing it is not always easy. And one thing I really believe in is that if you can tag people in the organization or yourself, you may open up a whole group of talent you didn't know that you even had in the organization, versus paying the recruiter outside of the organization to go find the person who, by the way, is going to look at the LinkedIn profile to find the person who may actually be in your organization. And the same in learning and development. If we could find a way to capture some of this inside the classroom or inside other activities, it's quite helpful. So I call that tagability. By the end of this, you'll figure out the rest of them. And in tagability, you should be able to tag yourself, but also tag others. If any of you know StrengthsFinder, we'll talk a little bit about that. You tag yourself with the strengths you have. You already do a bit of that, but getting other people's view of what you're good at is quite insightful, because you may think you're a leader, but everyone else thinks you're a really good expert, and that's not a bad thing. Being an expert is good, but you may have a different perception of yourself. So tagging others and tagging me is quite important. Next is Tagitude. And guess that's about your attitude, but it's about it being transparent. So one thing that's key is that you don't tag each other just to make each other feel good. Some people will, and that's okay. But because it's transparent, it makes it quite important that everybody understands who tagged who. And it's about your strengths, as I talked about. So I'm going to go rather quick now. And by tagging strengths, you become more visible, you see more possibilities, and it's much more flexible once you've shared this with everybody. If you can find the talents in the organization, you start to become more agile, not just for the organization, but for your customers. Because somebody who's a project manager in learning and development may also be able to be a project manager for another process, a change process, something that may not even have to do with L&D, but you don't even know that person is in the organization. So this is why it's about strengths. Next is tagutation. Can you guess what that is? This is the one you should know. Reputation. Because when I tag somebody else, it's self-regulating. I decide which tags I keep and which ones I get rid of. So when we launch this, usually in an organization, we get the organization to leave the tags for a while because, as you know with the crowdsourcing example, the more same tags you get, the bigger the word. The bigger the word means the more it's been viewed in the organization. But if somebody tags me with something I don't want to be known for, I'm a baker, but I don't want to be known as a baker, I'm in control of that, so I regulate it. The same is true is if I tag this lady as a baker, everybody knows that I know that she's a baker, so I also put my own reputation on the line by saying what I think they're good at. I think he's a good project manager, and so my name is there, it's transparent. Everybody can ask me, why did you say he's a good project manager? Oh, well, we worked on a project together. And he wasn't the role of project manager, but he sure brought in a lot of information that I didn't know we needed. So the self-regulation means the reputation of both people is in play. And I think that's what's interesting with these other sites is you just tick, yeah. You just go through. Would you say Michael is a good speaker? So people go, yes, yes. And sometimes they do that because they want to sort of wave, messenger wave, which is, I'm here, I tagged you, I endorsed you or something. Whereas it doesn't really matter outside of the organization who endorses me. It matters inside the organization because my own reputation is engaged. It's a bit like an employee referral program. Do you use employee referral programs, anybody? I mean, you know people refer people for lots of reasons, money, but also they've done all the screening for you. It's the same, it's as simple as that. Tag ignition, the biggest missing piece in companies today is recognition. It's about knowing how the organization feels if you do attitude surveys, what do you call them? Engagement surveys. You do them once every 6 months, right? Once a year, once every 2 years, and it's a snapshot of the day they took the engagement survey. This is a bit of a snapshot of every single minute. Companies who put a one-question survey on their website once a week get more data over a year because it's constant. A once-a-year survey gives us information, gives us tendencies, but what I see happen is 2 years later, there's no more budget for that. Or let's do another one. Or we'll do the actions and we do a big action plan. What a great way to find out how people are seeing themselves in terms of skills and behaviors every single day. And the performance review, 12 months later, is not good enough. How many of you know Tinder or Grindr? Okay, look around, look around. So that's what people expect. They expect a swipe. They expect to swipe something really quick. Twitter is short. Even Facebook Live has brought that about, is how can I get a video out really quick? Because I'm already using this platform. The performance review is a 6-month, a year-long process to have my boss tell me something good, and by the way, it's usually about what I should do better. With tags, I'm getting feedback right away from my peers, my colleagues, my boss, employees. It's not a performance system, it's not a peer review, it's about my talents. It's really about my talents. And I can have it every single second of the day, as often as somebody wants to tag me or I want to tag them. By tagging somebody else, I'm also asked to tag them, and it continues, and it just becomes normal. The performance review, we spend a lot of time on the development needs, but with tags, if I see that I'm not being viewed as something else, I can start to do something about it, sort of like a Johari window. I see what I think I'm good at, what they think I'm good at, and what we both think I'm good at. I call it vitamin R. And we don't do enough of it in organizations, and we expect it. That's why a like on Facebook, it was the biggest and best invention, for whatever selfish reasons we might think, because somebody recognizes something I did. Tag time is when and where, so it's exactly that. You can't just stick it out there. You have to tell people how to do it. But there's a million places to tag each other. It should not be a program. I work with Carnegie Mellon University, a women's negotiation skills program. So I can't speak from experience, but from what the experts tell me, women are the best negotiators for everybody else except for themselves. They negotiate the family, they negotiate the bills, they negotiate schedules, they negotiate, but when it comes to negotiating their own salary, they're not very good at it or as comfortable at it. It's the same with their talents. And so in this program at Carnegie Mellon, what they do is they tag inside this classroom over 5 months, and then the professor uses the talents to coach the individuals, the participants, as to all these things you're really good at. Here's how you can use them to negotiate. So that's just an example of how to use it in a learning environment. And then there's a lot of others, but it can be anywhere it needs to be sustainable. I think the best place is at the very beginning, on day 1. What happens is you received a CV, you've done the interviews, sometimes too many interviews, 5 people interview somebody. You give a handshake and sign a deal to hire the person. Then you put them to work, day 1, and you kind of forget they're there. You might send them to an orientation program, you brainwash them a bit about the organization, and then you get on to the next person. And guess what? The boss changes over time, the HR person changes over time, and had we asked that person to tag themselves on day 1, we would capture all these skills that we interviewed them for. Yes, we have a system that we scan the CV and we stick it in the system, and we ask people to put their own competencies in. I'm not saying any of that's bad. I'm just saying it could be so much more effective with a really simple thing. So what we've done with some companies is asked employees to tag themselves on day 1, and the reaction is, well, I just had all these interviews and everything. You know, they're probably thinking, you didn't take good notes. But they walk away saying they still want to know about me, which goes back to tagignition as well. So they go home and say, you know, they asked me even more about my background. Because somebody who has a job from a previous life has come into an organization because they want to do something else, brings a lot of talents that you forget about. It's just normal. Presentations, learning and development, so there's a lot of other places you can do it. So then I say, welcome to the tagosphere, and this is where I'll finish, because I have this kind of tagovision, and again, I've written a book about something that's super simple, and it's the first time I've ever written a book, and I don't know why anybody would want to read it, but because it's so basic, I thought the words had to get out. And I interview at the end a young boy, he's 9 years old, and I sat at his mother's house, talking to her, and he was in front of the TV doing the video games. And I asked Julian, I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm playing whatever the game was. And you know, I have to learn Japanese. Like, oh yeah, of course. I'm like, learn Japanese? He said, yeah, I'm learning Japanese while I'm doing this because I have a player on the other side of the world and I have the instructions, etc. And I sat there and I thought, you know, this young kid, he's going to have a whole different working life when he gets, you know, to working. And we're going to forget about all these things he's learned through life. So my other Tagavision is that we start really young. I think StrengthsFinder is a really, really great concept. And it would be even better if children learned earlier what they're good at versus all the things they're not good at. And they, of course, we want to get better at things. But sometimes hearing what we're good at will really encourage us to do things we might not have even thought of doing. So that's kind of my Tagavision. And hopefully we have a happier world, and that's my love, peace, and joy speech. So that's all. Is that clear? Is that simple enough? Yep.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think there might be some questions, remarks, whatever. So this is your chance. Please. Yes.
Thanks, guys. That was really good. And I mean, Gemma, you kind of brought there's a lot of threads that I think you talked about that I've seen in other sessions today. But Michael, my question is for you. When you say tag, where? Like an intranet or a SAP type platform, or what's your kind of? I'm not saying it should be tech specific, but I'm intrigued by.
No, so what I've said, being in your shoes and working for a company, I never want to hear a salesman. So I'm not selling a system I have. But it's a good, and it's something I'm really uncomfortable with actually. It can be in any system. All you need to do is build in a place for people to tag each other and teach them where to do it. I happen to walk through a process and it's very transparent, etc. But I intentionally don't talk about it as that for self-disclosure, you know, for whatever.
He made a real cool system, just like he wrote a real cool book. He's modest. He's a modest guy. Too modest, I think. My main thing is it should be as easy as an app. A lot of these things we do should be so. I use the Tinder example, but it should be simple like an app because that's what people want from outside of the organization. If it costs too much, they don't buy it. If they have to pay for it, because most apps you don't pay for anymore, if they don't like it, they delete it. And here we sit with 10-year contracts. So. Yes. Who else? Yeah. Andy.
Hi, thanks. This one's for you, Gemma. I spent a long time in financial services, so I know how risk-averse they are. What challenges did you come across from a data privacy perspective in starting to recommend the use of a public platform such as Facebook Workplace? It's one thing when the user chooses to use Facebook during their coffee break at work. It's a different thing when we tell them to use it.
Really great question, and absolutely something that I have come up time and time again, not just in financial services but across the board. The way that I've tackled that at Aviva is building really good relationships with our CISO team, so cybersecurity, and bringing them in at the start of the project and helping them to understand that this is not something that we're bringing in to pose a risk to the business. This is a real driver for growth. This is tied to our strategy, and if we don't do this, we're not doing our job. But actually understanding their concerns as well, so flipping the table and saying, what are you worried about? And making sure that you have the right people in the room to have those conversations. It's never easy, and everyone has things that they want to get out of it, but I think engaging people as early as you possibly can on that journey is definitely helpful.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the real underlying question is, did they make you put Facebook through one typical IT security check?
So at Aviva you can access Facebook from your work computer anyway, so there were some checks that had already been done in place. There are some additional security measures that we had to put in place around data loss prevention, so it wasn't as easy as just turning it on and saying go for it. Also, there's governance that we've had to put in place, so not just from a technical perspective, but from a behavioural perspective. these are things that we will and won't do as part of our programs for it. But I think all of it's about understanding why cybersecurity teams might feel that way, or risk or governance people might feel that way, and helping them to understand why we want to use the platform. But again, I would say all down to relationships and conversations and connecting people. It's never easy. It's a massive challenge, but yeah, I think it's an important one that we have to do. We have to fight the battle, because if we don't push it and we don't change, we just won't exist anymore. I think we have to do it. But yeah, it's not easy.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I had no doubt that you would have done. It's just I've been to so many of these sort of sessions where people are blandly saying, "Oh, just go off and use the public Yammer." Yeah, great.
Yeah,
tell that to your CISO.
Really good point. And I think CISO are our friends. They're part of the same organisation. We're going after the same thing in the end. And I think sometimes it's easy to demonise different parts of the organisation, but actually, if you take the time to build the relationship, it normally works. There are other things that you can try in more of a stealth mode. You just have to agree what you will and won't do on there in a way that's not going to be detrimental to CISO. So you may say, right, we want to use Twitter to solve a problem, but you're not going to share any business information. It may be a behavioural challenge that you're going after. But again, it's about having those conversations and understanding the parameters that you're working within, if that makes sense.
Thank you. There were some more questions. Yeah.
Questions for Michael. Have you got any examples of the benefits a company has seen by tagging for talent? So, for example, increased fulfillment of role within the company, or lower attrition, or things like that?
Recruitment costs. The talents they find is inside the organization already, and retention, where at least somebody's tapped them on the shoulder and asked them a question about their background. The retention's harder to measure because we don't know whether they would have left or not, but the recruitment costs.
Message for later. Who else? Yeah, gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Ino. I work for IKEA. I wonder, actually, a question to both of you. Do you have examples where you have applied social media or tagging in a multi-linguistic or multi-language environment, and where then you am particularly interested in having the language as an enabler instead of a barrier?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So I'm definitely not on the payroll of Facebook, just before I give this answer. There is a translation functionality built into things like Facebook Workplace, which means that whatever language it's in, so I work at Aviva, we work with colleagues speaking French Canadian, French, Italian, Polish, Vietnamese. We're able to translate that through the platform. There are other ways of doing it. I think that's probably the best instance that I've seen of it. But it still does prove a real challenge for us on platforms that aren't Facebook Workplace. So one of our big challenges is, if we build something, how do we roll that out into multiple languages in a way that's not manual? So it's still something that I've definitely not fixed. So any tips you've got, please bring them on.
Okay, good. Well, thank you all. I think there was, I want to connect to one of your messages, and that was drink your own champagne. I think it's about time that we go drink the champagne offered by the conference. So I want to thank you, both speakers, and of course you, audience, for being here. Please leave with an applause, and then I have an additional short message. Yeah.